Dolores Casey and I'm the Children's Services Librarian with Cork County Council Library and Art Service, and today I have two very special guests, Ikki Keane, who works in Cove Library, and Tjorven, Deane, who works in Skibbereen Library, and they are both very experienced librarians and have a very big interest in children's literature in particular. And we're going to discuss how to encourage reluctant readers, the children who maybe like to browse but not really engage fully with books. And there we have tips and strategies and just a little bit of encouragement for the parents as well to get the kids a little bit more involved in the reading and a little maybe progress them a little bit along if they're a little bit stuck in a rut as well. So hi Ikki, hi Tjorven, welcome.
Hello. Hi,
Thanks
Dolores.
for joining me. I suppose the first question today I was going to ask was, and a lot of parents probably ask you this at the library desk regularly anyway, so it's something you're quite used to dealing with. Like, what would be your top tips for a parent who has a child who's a reluctant reader? Ikki, could I ask you first? What would you usually say? What kind of tips you'd give?
I think it's important just to note that maybe there are two things that are quite important. One is the reading material should be age appropriate, and also it should be interesting. So they're the two things really. So to try and find age appropriate material, you need to really, I think, be able to know how advanced the child is with reading. So they use sometimes this 5-finger test where you put up a finger for every word that you don't understand. So if you have 5 fingers up and more, that means that perhaps the book is too difficult for you. So try and find something easier. So that's one way of gauging it. It's also important just to see what the child is interested in reading, what are the child's hobbies, what do they like to read, what interests them, rather than say forcing our own ideas on the child as to what they might want to read. Because sometimes parents have read Enid Blyton, or they might have read all the classics, you know, The Wind in the Willows and those kind of things in their childhood, and they think maybe they'd be still, you know, the books that would interest their child, and that's not always the case. And particularly now, there's just so much wonderful literature out there, wonderfully illustrated literature, as well as books from fantasy, adventure, horror, funny books. And they're just so much more, I think, of interest to children now. So it's best to probably keep your mind open. And perhaps when you come to the library, take 2 books. Say if you have one book that is a book that the child can read, so that will give them confidence that they are able to at least finish a book, and that's really important for the child. And then secondly, you could take a book that the child is just interested in. Perhaps it could be a non-fiction about sharks or dinosaurs or something that they would like to read about and learn about, but maybe it's something that you as a parent or carer would have to read to them, but that's fine as well, because, you know, as we know, Dolores, there's been so much research out there that shows that reading aloud is so beneficial to children. So I think it's, you know, we can do that. You know, the parent can read the book aloud, or they could read 1 page themselves and the child could read a page, or they could read until the child stops reading because they've come across a difficult word. But just to keep praising the child, to keep encouraging the child, and not to be saying, oh, you've made a mistake, you know, but just always be very positive, because, you know, we don't want to get just about reading. We want to make it fun, and by making it fun, that will be really helpful. And I think also, if we are readers ourselves, so if the parents can read and they can show the child they are reading, then the child can see that reading is fun. It's, you know, it's something that everyone around them is doing. And if there is that kind of culture in their school as well, where teachers are reading, then teachers can get more informed about all the new books that are out there. You know, they're not just like still dealing with the books that they might have read as children. And I know a lot of teachers are very, very good at that, you know, keeping up to date with all the new stuff that is out there. But I think even us as librarians, to read all the new things that are coming out, so we can then give the children that information and that choice. So they're not really just stuck with all those, you know, 3 or 4 well-known authors out there, but they've got more names to come into the library and choose books from. So I think all those things are quite important, and they can go on various websites. You know, if they're interested in, say, history or geography, you can go on. There's a Books for Topics website which links subjects to books that are out there, fiction and non-fiction. And to just kind of keep an open mind to read everything other than just a book, you know, because reading will be reading. And I can't just emphasize praising the child for when they are making to read.
Yeah, totally agree. That's really, really great. They're great tips. Tjorven, do you have anything else that you would normally kind of give, you know, say to parents to reassure them or to help them along?
Well, I would echo a lot of what Ikki has said. I would say, firstly, very important is to find the topic that interests them and stimulates them. And in the library, we have many lovely non-fiction books on a huge range of topics. So maybe your child isn't interested in committing to a full novel or piece of fiction, but they might have a huge interest in a certain sport or craft, or be it animals or travel or space, whatever. And there'll be a book available on that topic in our library. And even during this lockdown period of time now, there's many children's non-fiction titles on our BorrowBox app that they can use. And the non-fiction has many different levels. So you have a very, you know, you start off very easy and going all the way up on a huge range of topics. So
it's a bit more structured then, I suppose, isn't it, the reading?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we think that to read means only to read fiction, and we forget that any reading is worthwhile. And that after a time of dipping in and out of factual books, that a child can often be inspired to pick up a novel with a theme that interests them, and they're hooked. And even if not, and they carry on to read lots and lots of factual non-fiction books, that's absolutely fine too. Because as Ikki said, any reading is reading.
Great. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think the non-fiction is a bit overlooked at times, non-fiction books, and they're very useful. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you, Tjorven. Carry on.
No, again, I would say, you know, read with them. And I just find from my own experience, that's a great way to get them motivated. And even with older children, pick a novel that they will enjoy, and, you know, again, pick their theme that interests them, and start reading a few pages or one chapter per night, or even just a couple nights in the week. I would still do this with my 12-year-old, and it's just a really enjoyable time. And she has found it challenging in the past to apply herself to reading a full book, but reading together has made it interesting, and now she's just reading loads of books independently.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah. To add to that, then I would say another huge resource is the graphic novels. Many more authors are producing graphic novels now, so we have a good selection in our library. And just following the story and pictures with the words just brings it to life so vividly for so many children, and it enhances the reading experience for them. Yeah, and just finally, as Ikki said, again, leading by example is key to everything we do with our children. And if they see us becoming excited by or engrossed in a book that we're reading, be it for ourselves or you know, to them, they'll be curious to try it out for themselves. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, totally. Excellent. Thank you, Tjorven. I'll ask you again maybe, and then we'll go back to Ikki. There's just one, you know, sometimes I wonder, like, you know, would you ever use maybe a strategy or a game or something to encourage a child to read? You know, you've mentioned non-fiction books and lots of different kind of possible strategies there, but is there anything more specific that you could recommend, or am I being a bit too prescriptive in saying that?
No, I think Ikki touched on it there earlier, just the idea of taking turns in reading. So when you're reading with your child, you read a couple of pages, give them the opportunity to read a couple of pages, and just making it into a fun activity. That would be a big thing. And then also I would find, I think Ikki was saying this too, reading the titles as well yourself before or at the same time as your child is reading that book. Just with the juvenile book club that I run in the library, I would make out a number of questions from the book we're reading. And so the child is inspired to read the book to find out the answers.
Yeah.
And that it takes a bit of preparation, of course, but it is worth it.
Okay.
So yeah.
We pass over to Ikki on that. Ikki, do you have anything to add to that?
I think I would agree with Tjorven, like in the book club in Cork as well, we'd be very similar, it's a great way of actually finding what children like, because sometimes you could think, oh, that's a really interesting book, but the child would say, I don't know, that wasn't very authentic dialogue, children really speak like that. So it's very interesting. You get their kind of, and there'll be no holds barred as well. They'll tell you exactly what they think of it. So that's kind of very interesting. I think it's also another way you could, I suppose, get children interested in different types of books is maybe get it onto the publisher's website or the author's website, because there are so many resources on those websites. There are obviously teachers' resources to do with specific books, but there are also colouring pages, word searches, puzzles, all sorts of different activities that you can do. So they are often kind of a little bit overlooked, but I certainly find that they're extremely interesting to go in and have a look. And also remember that authors, they love you to contact them, write to them, and they're always on Twitter, they'll send you a message back. I mean, how excited would we have been if, one of our kind of, favorite authors would, and we were children, would have replied back to us.
Great encouragement.
Yeah, and even as old as I am now, I if I do tweet an author and they write back, I get really excited about it. I can imagine that'd be something like if the teachers or the children at home were doing, getting in contact with the authors, and that kind of involves interest. And there's so many of them who are at the moment, because of lockdown, engaging with children by reading their own books, or they're doing draw-alongs, and again, that also makes the author somebody human, that they can relate to, and then they can get interested. But I think importantly, I would say, for children who are struggling, to let them know that they are not alone. And so when I do school visits, I always tell children about some of the authors that they would be familiar with. Say, for example, Dave Pilkey, because they all love the Captain Underpants books. And I would say, as a child, like, Dave Pilkey, as Tjorven would probably know as well, he was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. And he was always being sent out into the corridor to sit there, but he used his time. He used his time to sit there doodling. And when he went off to university, he was advised to perhaps consider becoming an illustrator. And here we are. He's writing such amazing novels that never stay on the shelf long enough. And same with Liz Peachon, who did the Dogman series. She also had huge difficulty and was basically finding it very, very difficult at school. She was a year behind her peers, and it was only later on that she was diagnosed as, being dyslexic. So there's a lot of authors out there. Michael Morpurgo also struggled when he was at school. There's Abby Elphinstone. She was basically branded as unteachable. So there are lots of people. So I think if children know that it's, they're not alone in having these struggles, and yet
it's very important.
Before them who've had those struggles, but have actually now, hey, look, they're reading the books written by those particular authors. So I think that's important as well.
Very important. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Ikki. Thanks, Tjorven. Will we leave it at that for today? I think that's a lot of information for parents maybe to think about, and we might follow up at another stage soon with maybe alternatives to traditional reading and maybe discussing book clubs. But hopefully this is a helpful discussion that will maybe help parents who have reluctant readers and give them ideas as to how they could maybe, help them along and help them in their reading journey. And with Ireland Reads coming up in February 2021, we're all aiming towards reading a little bit more towards the end of this month, February 25th, and encouraging our children to read as well. So thanks, Tjorven. Thanks, Ikki, for those wonderful insights and tips, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Thanks, bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.